Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next installment of the Democratizing Work seminar series, which interrogate the three pillars of the Democratizing Work Manifesto: to democratize work, to decommodify work, and to decarbonize the planet. My name is Pavlina Cherneva, and I'm really delighted to welcome today's panelists to talk about a real-world experimentation around the idea of the job guarantee and the way it might reflect and incorporate the three principles of our work. As some of you know, over the last few years, France has been piloting a number of projects, and the original approach aimed to create employment for the long-term unemployed individuals who are willing to get back to work. And this then led to the implementation of the zero long-term unemployment territories. This was really an experiment that was set in place by forces of civil society that eventually were able to implement pass a law, and the national government is today funding the jobs that are being created in that experimentation. But nevertheless, the program is still run by largely on voluntary basis by, again, stakeholders of civil society. The program has now been expanded to more than 50 locations, providing an opportunity for us to think about the possibilities and the challenges of implementing a job guarantee and how we might make sure that it is grounded in the three principles. The program clearly has emancipatory potential. And today we welcome both practitioners, evaluators, and scholars on the question. So what I'd like to do is introduce to you our panelists, but perhaps I will introduce them before they start speaking. The order will be: first we will have Antonin Gregorio, and then Timothée Diverger, and we will conclude with Aurélien Lamine. So before you each begin, I will introduce you in greater detail. So we start with Antonin, who is Executive Director of the Association of Territoires Zéro Chômage de Longue Durée. He has a degree in social law and political science. He began his professional career at the National Assembly as a social advisor, and he will follow the examination of reforms in the field of social law. In 2015, he worked with our friend and colleague, Laurent Gulam. I'm sorry for the pronunciation, but Laurent has participated in our workshops. He is currently the president of the foundation of the Zero Long-Term Unemployment Territories. And together, at that time, was a deputy, and together with Antonin, they put together the parliamentary review and the law that eventually allowed the experiment to be launched, initially in 10 territories, now in 50. So we welcome you, Antonin. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for this invitation. I've been Isabelle and all together. And yes, we try to introduce where we are in France now and all the outcomes we have, because finally we started in 2016, so almost 8 years now. So it starts to be a bit long, and you can see many outcomes. Maybe I will try to share my screen if you allow me to do so. All right, so it might work. I hope so. I hope so. Wait a minute. It does work. I hope so. Do you see anything? Yeah, maybe. Now you see my screen, right?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So right to employment. First, to say that long-term unemployment has been important and participant challenge in France, and almost 2 million people still are long-term unemployed. And after a few experiments, we just show that those people have indicated that they would prefer to work if jobs were available to them, and they're not there because there's not enough. There's just not enough work experience, and that's what we have to do: create those jobs. And our project in 2015, if I remember well, was based on this, and it looks for creating the access, the right for everyone collectively to get a job. And I have to say that in France, the preamble of the French Constitution say, as it is written, everyone has a duty to work and the right to get a job. And actually, we had 3 pillars of our project. The first one was that no one is unemployable, and if working conditions are adapted to the person. Second is that there is no shortage of useful work. And third, there is no shortage of money. Kind of say that money is not an issue. And this foundation are based on a vision of employment as a right. Maybe just to get back on a few fundamentals we have, and following principle of actions. First, and it's a weird word, this exhaustiveness. We find here a fundamental notion of the project, and the aim is to create jobs necessary in the community to eliminate people's job deprivation via what we call the Companies for Employment Purposes, CEP, or any partner of local committee for employment. This term, exhaustiveness, must be understood as a dynamic element that evolves as the experiment is implemented. Second, maybe it's the non-selective hiring, and that's really important to say that there are no selection that should limit hiring. It's up to the structure for employment purposes, this company, to propose work that is commensurate with people's abilities. It's the notion of chronological hiring of people in the CEP after identifying them, and I will talk about this. And maybe the third one, because I won't be able to talk about all of this one, maybe the employment supplementarity. This CEP must endeavor to offer additional jobs in the territory in conjunction with the economic and social fabric. The most important thing is to say that we don't have to destroy jobs that are in territories, but we have to create new jobs. And I think here we have something to do with ecological transition, and I will talk about this. Sorry, but to click on it. I just wanted to show you that was implementation period, the first experimentation we had from 2016 to 2021 in 10 territories, as said Avelina, everywhere in France, or almost, maybe not in the west and south. And there was this 10 authorized local in this first experimentation. We have to say that there were, at the end of 2021, 15 territories, and they employed 955 persons in 17 companies for employment purposes. We still, but we have to say that we still had more than 400 people permanently deprived of employment in those territories. So to go to this exhaustiveness, we still have to work to create new jobs, maybe new CEP. And there are the new ones. So here you have the map of the second experimentation from 2021 to 2026 in extension to the first 10 territories. And you can see that, yeah, I think it's about yesterday, we had 2 new territories. So we are now 56 authorized local community oh, sorry, it's no problem. And these territories have hired now 2,053 persons in 58 CEPs, and we have like 54% of women and 45% of men from the beginning of the experimentation. And you have to know also that we have more than 100 projects that want to join the experimentation. And we have to deal with this, all those territories who want to get into the experimentation, and they still have 1 year to get into it. So that's really good for us. Maybe really quickly to go back from to the method, and we have 4 big pillars. The first one is the development of consensus. It's really important in our project is to say that the project can be brought up by the collectivity, an association, civil organization, and the achievement of consensus maturity is effective when the majority of stakeholders in the territory decided that they no longer wanted their community to be deprived with employment, and that they would do everything possible to achieve it. So to do so, we create a local committee for employment, LCE, established to administer the project and allow any willing people who is a long-term unemployed to obtain a job. And this committee consists of any and all interested stakeholders, businesses, civil society organizations, individuals, and as well as relevant local government authorities, and most important, the people who are permanently unemployed. That's, I think it's the key, is that we work with the people and not for the people. And those people are actors, main actors of this experimentation. Second, let's talk about those people. We have to identify and meet all those PPD, people permanently deprived of employment, and there are no selection. I mean, the territory will decide if this person or this person is deprived of employment, and this is a local committee who will examine if this person is long-term unemployed. And that's what we are going to ask willing people, what they want to do, what they don't want to do, and what they want to learn, and how they will be hired, either in our CEP, either in other local businesses that you have on the territory. Work with the assistance of local government authorities, and this committee then identifies all those eligible workers and approaches them with the offer of a place in our CEP. The program is entirely voluntary. Only volunteer people can go into the CEP. They're not forced to go in, and that's really important, mainly now in France, where we have many debate about this this thing. And there is then a consultation process with a prospective participant to establish what skills they already have, what skills they would like to develop. And we have to say that what we developed is thought as complementarity for the territory. And this CEP is a tool. And the local committee looks for an adapt solution for people among the partners in the territory. And if there are no solutions found for the person, this person will be orientated to the CEP. Then let's talk about the third one, if it works. Yeah. The identification of useful activities. That's really important because, as I said in the introduction, we don't want to destroy activities that already developed in the territories. And the aim is to support the development of the local economy. There is a consultation process within the steering committee to reach a consensus on what needs the local community remain unmet and what productive work needs to be done to meet those needs. When the local committee decides that what work the local project will undertake, the guiding principle is to create additional jobs. The local committee must ensure that it means not generate employment by crowding out, or undercutting existing jobs in the community, as I said. Then maybe the most popular thing in France about this project are those companies for employment purposes. We have to say that this, the committee established at least one company for employment purposes to implement that work that is needed. And it's a local non-profit can choose to register as a CEP. Otherwise, the project sets up one from scratch. These are the entities under which people who are permanently unemployed are formally employed. And all the future workers will be employed by the CEP, established as a non-profit. And as a consequence, they are entitled to all the regular workers' rights enshrined in French law, including the minimum wage and any relevant benefits. And I think it's really important to say this, and the importance of all those rights enshrined in French law. Just to talk about, maybe because the time is running, I won't talk about this, it's not so important. Maybe the economic model, how it works, and especially for the state. With this little pig, you will see that the project consists of the activation of passive expenses, passive unemployment insurance. And we, every year in France, studies show that we spend like 43 billion to finance job deprivation. And our proposal is to make the choice to use them to produce employment. The aim is to redirect the cost of job deprivation to finance the creation of those additional jobs for people who are permanently unemployed in this given territory. So you see in the middle, 17,500 is what the state gives per full-time person yearly. And it matches with avoided costs, saving and incomes from this. And we will be able to hire all those people. The macroecological study estimated the cost of this job deprivation around those 17,500 per year per person. This is within the ballpark of the 23,000 it costs to pay the salary of someone full-time at the French minimum wage over the same period. So then this CEP, we have to produce stuff and make some money to fill the gap between how much the state give and how much it costs. Maybe then I will just talk about the outcomes we have. And so what we saw after 6 years about this. The result of the first experimentation, as it was written, over the last 5 years, 1,500 people have been employed in the program. And we can see that 50 managed to successfully find regular employment outside of, sorry, it's not SEP, it's CEP, we changed the name. Before it was structure of employment person, and now we call it company. And this is 1,040 people permanently deprived of employment, currently employed in those CEP. Maybe to talk, one thing really interesting, I think, in what we do is that almost half of what we develop is about ecological transition, farm work, circular economy, activities against food waste, all those activities. And it shows that if you try to identify activities that is needed on territories, they're mainly about ecological transition. And I think we didn't expect such a result. But then we also have local development, general services of provision for local businesses, organization, tourism, and local production, and about 17% about social cohesion, building shared values and communities of interpretation, reducing disparities and exclusion. So many things like sharing, delivery, transport, bike repairing, all those stuff. About the profile, so you have 55% of women, 46% of men in the CEP. More than 50% of people are 42 years old. 21%, and I think now it's 25, 50 years or more. They have no qualification. And there is an very interesting study from the labor minister that shows two things. First, that is almost half of these people would have never found a job out of the project. And I think it's really important to tell. And almost 50% would never had a permanent contract, because in the CEP, people have permanent contract, and half of them wouldn't have ever heard about a permanent contract without the project. Maybe about all the what we called the human-centered approach. Is that today we have 23% of workers with disabilities in the CEP. Sometimes it goes to 50%. And to show that it's here an inclusive model, job adapted to the person. And I think it's really important to underline it. They have a job that makes sense because it responds to societal and global challenges, as I talked about ecological transition. And many have a job, help people to get back to the public sphere and get back to school to pick up their children, all those externalities that we have to underline, but that we have many problems in our evaluation, and we talk about evaluation, to show all those externalities that the state don't want to see. To say if you can't monetize it, it doesn't exist. And I think we are not alone in this problem, but it's a really, really huge problem we have. And so, because of this problem, we've decided to create, and Timothée is the president of it, an observatory about the experimentation in 2022, to know how project better, to understand better the effect in willing people, employees, territories. And actually it's composed by 60 researchers working all around France, and they actually respond to a core of interest. Core of interest around 4 axes. First, the invasion of the logic of employment. Second, right to employment and access to rights about the project. Third, the territorial regulation, all the institutional dynamics that create the experimentation. And fourth, social impact measures and creation of value. And if you want, we have a database free access with more than 200 documents that we will try to translate in English to allow everyone to be able to read it. That's another problem we have. Everything is in French. And to say, this observatory organized webinars I think to cross all what the researchers have to say and all the actors live on their territories, and to be able to also see all those externalities and the effects of the project. And maybe to finish, I hope I'm not too long. Oh, sorry. To talk about Europe, because actually the stakes are first to spread the idea of the right to employment. And tomorrow, the Plan Committee of the region will vote a report for supporting territories that wants to put in place the project, thanks to many politics and a qualified person that works at this level. And we see that the project was also auditioned at the UN and by the United Nations Special Reporter on extreme poverty and human rights. And we see that now this project spread in Wallonia, in Belgium, for example, with the 17 territories, but also in Netherlands, in Rome, in Italy, with a new association in 2 neighborhoods of Rome, Territoria di Scoperzione Zero. And they also have a Flemish association who works with us in Finland. And I think that we also have to work at this level, and that's why we are really pleased to talk today with you, and also to push the European Union on this stake of creating this European job guarantee, I hope, maybe, and that we'll be able to see what we've done in France, even if we are sure that it won't be exactly the same in each country. I think we have to hear that we have specificities, and that even in France, we are working now to see what we will do after 2026, and how it could be on all the French territory. I think that's the main stake for us, actually. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonin. This was wonderful and a great connection to the next two speakers. I want to mention that there will be another seminar in June where we will discuss the forthcoming UN report on the job guarantee by the Special Rapporteur Olivier de Scuta. And we have there seem to be multiple parties that are working on a European job guarantee. So we will be looking for those developments. The next presenter will be Timothée Duverger, already introduced by Antonin, but Timothée is the president of the Observatory of the Zero Long-Term Unemployment Areas. He is a research engineer at Sciences Po Bordeaux and a researcher at the Emily Durkheim Center. He has numerous responsibilities at Sciences Po and directs numerous programs. I want to highlight that his recent publication, a book, L'économie sociale et solidaire, his research work deals with public policies in the intellectual history and social history concerning the field of social and solidarity economy. He is one of the scholars and the president of this network that was created to evaluate the territories. I think it's important to distinguish that there is also a government-appointed body, but this is a body of scholars interested in kind of independent evaluation. So Timothée, thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you very much for this presentation and your invitation, you and Isabelle. I will take my slides. Sorry. Up. You can see? It works? Okay,
yes,
thank you. So I wanted to speak about two dimensions of the French experiment. First of all, an analysis through the prism of democratized work based on the triptych, and you mentioned it before, and an analysis of the implementation of the job guarantee using TZ. Maybe I can say TZ. You will understand. Thank you. Sorry. TZ aims at donc for the democratized dimension of your proposal. TZ aims at territorial exhaustiveness and manages to capture invisible or excluded people, notably disabled people, because you're really excluded from the market, thanks to its outreach method. And they will capt, they will research strong with the people who are jobless. TZ stands for the inversion of the logic of employment, as Antonin said, according to which companies for employment purposes identify people's skills and desires and search the territory for socially useful work that can meet them. So I will not develop this point because Antonin did that before. The long-term unemployment also participate in the governance of the experiment, in strategic decisions, because they are in the local committee for employment. They can participate to the recruitment, to the identification of activities, and they are stakeholders of this committee. And they participate to in the national governance because they are associated with the association of TZ. Voilà. In companies, for employment purposes, they participate in social dialogue institutions and may participate in the governance of the structure. It's not always the case because it depends on the type of juridical status. In associations, they are not at the governance they are not in the governance, but in the cooperative forms, they are. They participate to the governance and the decisions. In many time, managerial practices are often participatory. It's not always the time. It's complicated, of course, but they try to be participative. However, the questioning of the principle of subordination remains incomplete in practice. It's difficult, of course, because we are in a capitalist world. So there are difficulties in bringing out people's projects because people in many times can't say what they want. It depends on their resources. There are tensions with the profitability requirements because you are in these companies there is an economic model and you have to be profitable a little, not so much, but a little, and in some case it happens tensions with the emancipation project. They are structuring to a middle management. It's a hierarchic organization, so it can its intention. So that's for the democratize dimension. For decommodify, economic security is guaranteed to the long-term employed. Like Antoinette said, systematic recourse to open-ended contracts to which social rights are attached. It's not secondary contracts. It's not minor contracts. It's full contracts. They are fully recognized as salaries, as employees. They have rights. It's really important. It's a real difference. So the market is embedded in principles of solidarity. There is, like he said, recycling of expenses. It avoided by unemployment. Non-competition of activities. It's complementary activities. Organization of employees' working time. The salaries can decide on their working time. It's an important difference. And they are in social and solidarity economy structures, like associations or cooperatives. So they are non-profit. It's a big difference from other companies. There is an improvement in the living conditions of employees, material conditions, state of health, well-being, social links, projections towards the future, meaning at work. It's important in the context because we have a big debate on the sense of the meaning at work, on the work in France and in other countries, like in the US, of course. If territorial exhaustiveness is aimed at, like I said before, it is difficult to achieve because of the gaps in information and mobilization. It's difficult to catch the people because they are desocialized in many times. So it's a difficulty, as well as the queues that are created in relation to the reception capacities of companies for employment purposes. Sometimes the companies can't employ immediately people. As for the third dimension, decarbonize, companies for employment purposes must generate activities of social utilities. Of social utility. So it means they have to develop activities on social of social activities or ecological activities. It's defined in the law, in the SSE Act of 2014. We define the concept of social utility. There are advantages in fiscality. Maybe I think we said it's useful. The results of the experiment found show three types of activities. Social, I cite them: social cohesion and the fight against exclusion, environmental transition, development of the local economic fabric. So it is really important to say it is not in all the case decarbonize activities, but in all the case this is a sustainable development because it is an endogenous development. The activities are decarbonized. They respond to social needs and create territorial value chains, a factor of collective well-being. The activities participate to the local communities. So I wanted to speak about a last point. What job guarantee could we imagine for the future after the first two experimental laws? There are three main scenarios. The first, il y a des erreurs. Ouais. Sorry, there is a mistake. So there is three scenario. The first one is the continuation of existing experiments. The state can say it maintains the 50 or 60 experiments that exist. Second scenario, it's a spin-off in all willing territories with no limit to the number. Sorry, I understand what I did. Okay. And scenario 3, sorry, the generalization of the employment guarantee. But this comports two risks. For spin-off, it's a risk for territorial equity. What about non-voluntary territories? When territories doesn't want to participate to the experiment or to the job guarantee, what we have to do? And the generalizations carries the risk of losing the emancipation project, the specific inversion of the employment logic, and the territorial encourage. The solution is probably a territorialized employment guarantee, as TZ, the association, propose. Yesterday they launched a big consultation about this, and I think there are three issues. Carrying a project for the emancipation of people. It's a reversal of the inversion of the logic of employment, economic security, etc. Successfully moving from the mesoscale territories to the macro scales nation. This the problem of territory equity. And maintaining the territorial anchorage of companies. So this could involve a transformation of employment policies based on three pillars. The first one is national funding of the job guarantee, like they do with the experiment. Second one is a public employment service based on territorial governance. This point is really important. It's the role of the local governments. We have to, we need a territorial or a local governance because the emancipation projects depends on it. I think this. And the delegation, and there is a third pillar. It's the delegation to the SSE of the creation of enterprises to fight unemployment with multi-stakeholder governance that includes particularly employees and local governments. It's a really important point because in the experiment now, as I said, the people are not often in the governance of the companies. When they are associations, it's not an obligation. So I think the cooperative model is better for this, and the second condition is the presence of the local governments, because they are the guarantee. There is a territorial anchorage because of the presence of this local governance. So probably it's the scenario of the dissemination of a job guarantee in France will be like treat this all these points. Thank you very much for your attention. And as you see, I did a big effort to to speak English. I'm not Antonin, but I did my best.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much, Timothée. I appreciate that. And our final expert is going to be Aurélien Lamine, who will give us a critical perspective on what is happening in Belgium. As you heard, the French experiments has inspired other experimentations in other places in Europe. Aurélien is a legal scholar who specializes in labor law. She's also a philosopher. She's currently associate professor of law at the Université Catholique de Louvain, where she teaches international European and Belgian labor and social security law. She is a member of a research center. I'll try to read Centre de Recherche, Entreprise, Droit et Société, again at Louvain. And her recent work focuses on the comparative study of collective bargaining systems, the regulation of multinational firms, and non-standard forms of work. Welcome, Aurélien.
Hello, thank you for this introduction, and thank you for having me here today. So do you hear me properly? Perfect. I will not be using a PowerPoint. So the first thing I wanted to say is that I will speak about the project we are all interested in on the basis of a work we are conducting with a colleague who's actually here, colleague and a friend, Julien Charles, and so he'll be here and for sure help me with the Q&A that will follow. So we heard a lot about the let's call it TZ then, initiative in France and how it was developed, and also all the good points that we got from the implementations and the good feedbacks. Julien and I, we focused on the institutional and even legal dimension of the project. So we asked in our work what role has played the national authorities or the other authorities in general to support the project, and what were, it's still questions at this stage, but the legal ingredients, the institutional ingredients that made such a project a success, and why we're asking that. You understood it now because we mentioned it already twice. We got interested in this institutional dimension because different actors in Belgium have been asking for the transposition of the model in Belgium since 2017. And this has been heard by our governments. We know that Belgium is complex. We have many layers of governments. So some of them, actually 3, had added this project in their declaration, their program. So this is the program they are following for the legislative term. So it's a commitment they made to pursue that. And since then, a number of steps have been undertaken to implement this at different levels. The part that is the most advanced so far, we mentioned it already, is the one developed in the Walloon region, because already a year ago there was a call for proposals for projects, territories that wanted to implement the project, and on 19 candidates, 17 territories were selected. There is an envelope, a big envelope of funding, if I'm not mistaken, a bit more than 100 million, euros for the coming 4 years. That is actually funded half by the Walloon government and half by the European Social Fund. I'm not going to get into details. Some of the conditions are different, and I'll get to this later, but it's probably worth mentioning that the management of this project will be dealt with by the ministry, the ministry in charge of social economy, and also by the office in charge of unemployment in the Walloon territory, Walloon region. So this is for the more recent steps or practical steps. The reason why we got interested in the institutional conditions of the process was because, as you understood from now, the project of Territoire Zéro Chômeur is not only about giving a job to the people who want a job. It has many different dimension goals that should that are followed in parallel and are actually parallel very well the goals of this, you know, of the democratized, decommodify and decarbonize project. So I'm not getting into that again, because you've heard how this project, dimensions of this project. But what was important for us is that we could identify the institutional conditions that allowed not only to fulfill one of these goals, but to keep the interesting nature of the project, that is its complex character with all the goals that it pursues all together. So it led us to compare the French and the Belgian system and how it went so far, and we made a number of comparisons. I'm only going to focus on 3 main issues, main points that we considered as being problematic, actually, and we chose them all because we think they're also useful to feed a conversation about establishing a job guarantee at a larger scale. So the first issue that we spotted is related to the democratic or undemocratic nature of the process of the transposition in Belgium. As you understood from the previous speakers, in French, the initiative has a legal support. It didn't develop thanks to a law, it developed before, but at some point in the process, there was a legal debate about it. And it's not, of course, by chance. It's because in France, they have this constitutional right to experiment. And through that, they can derogate from certain things in the law. They will do things differently. That's the core of experimentation. But to do that, of course, you need to have some guarantees, right? You have to give a frame, and that's why in France they oblige the parliament to discuss the experimentation and to fix the frame for it. In Belgium, actually, you don't find anything similar in the process of transposition so far. What we have to say that, of course, we don't has not been a clear public debate about territoire zéro chômeur. All there are many actors involved, of course, also researchers, but many things happen behind closed doors in cabinets and ministries, and there's a lack of clarity in this process that clearly asks some fundamental question about the process per se. If we believe that to pursue a project to foster democracy, we also need to foster it through a democratic process. So this is clearly a first point we realize that asks a question about the appropriateness of the project among the population also, and the relevant actors, to empower them, because as no public debate in the parliament was held about it, it's not as clear in the due sense that a public was formed around the question, that, and they were not actually able to debate publicly of the common needs and aims they were pursuing. So that's the first issue, first problem, and that is connected also to some kind of systematic use of public procurements and public contracts, which is, of course, another way to select things, to select operators, to select people who are going to evaluate. And of course, there are questions about the relevance of using this kind of selection process instead of deliberative process to develop an initiative that has democracy as one of its main aims. So that was the first point, the democratic or undemocratic nature of the process of transposition. The second, and I repeat, it's of course not an exhaustive presentation. The second point is about, it's connected to the first one, it's connected to the legal nature of the framework and the space it left for experimentation. So in the French example, as I told before, you have a law that describes establishes clearly the aims that are pursued by the experimentation, which of course gives a particular value to these objectives that will actually serve as references in the evaluation process. Also, a number of the means that will be used to fulfill these aims, the type of contracts, the fact that a particular, a new company will be created. So a number of means are also fixed in the law, and this of course clarifies a number of things and allows the actors on the ground to have guidance on the type of experimentation they want to conduct. In Belgium, because it's mainly soft law, everything is discussed a bit behind the doors through call for proposals with evaluation by the ministries and the cabinets. It's harder to, this brings a lot of uncertainties, notably in the margin of freedom that will be given to the people on the ground, their leverages in experimentation, the possibility to derogate from existing law, because as I said earlier, this is also, of course, if you create breaches in equality, or you derogate from the established law, there is, of course, a need for another law to give you the right to do so. So this clarifies things, and this is definitely lacking. Also, the fact that it's not fixed in the law might dissuade people because of this lack of clarity, creates also as we said, we have shown earlier, it's a complex experiment. When things are not clarified, it creates doubts among the actors. They don't really know which direction to take. And there is a big risk, actually. They might not innovate the way we would want them to innovate in the sense of the original project. Because if the law and the framework remains the same, there's a risk that some actors would, continue business as usual, especially because the project allows existing companies to actually launch a process of territoire zéro chômeur beside other projects they were conducting before. So there's not this obligation of new organizations. So this is really the question of the
I think we have some
time constraints. 2 minutes, 1 minute?
No, we have some, you're breaking sometimes the connection, but it's okay now. Yes, it's fine. Go on.
Okay, sorry about that. Law that can impair experimentation when it's too constraining, too specific, when it sets like limitative definitions, but also law that can be an essential tool for a strong experimentation to live, and notably by imposing some kind of safeguards to ensure that the main aims we're pursuing together are actually fulfilled or actually evaluated through time. So the importance of a clear framework. The last point I want to make is the existence of an intermediary level in the construction of the transposition. We haven't been talking about that a lot so far, but I would be interested to hear Antonin and Timothy on that. But in France, the role of the Fonds d'Expérimentation is a crucial.
Okay, let's give her a second.
Among territories, discussions about good practices, exchange of good practices, training, control of central committees, evaluation. So it's a central role that actually nourishes the democratic character of the process and allows the process to be tailored also to the realities of the ground. And in Belgium, we lack completely this middle intermediary level. So there is a higher risk that there will be a gap between the level of the government deciding on the allocation of resources and then the people on the ground not having too much clarity on what's their freedom to act. And this, of course, might also impair the development of the experimentations on the ground. So this intermediary level could be created autonomously by actors themselves, but it would not be the same, of course, without institutional and financial support from the authorities. I will stop here. I'm not sure I've heard me so well because I can see some confusion on the faces. I'm so sorry about that. But of course, feel free to ask questions. There are some movements in Brussels also, in the Brussels region that is also moving. We are waiting for some news on that, but hopefully it will be maybe promising for the experiments to come. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Leanne. It was great. There were just a couple of interruptions, and maybe I will just give the opportunity of Timothy and Antonin to address the question, but we may not have heard the full range. The mid-organization that you're talking about, the mid-intermediary, you're referring to the foundation, the TZ Foundation, as basically the entity that communicates between the policymaker and on the ground experimentation. Is that what you meant in this last question to Timothy and Antonin?
Yeah, I was talking about the Fonds d'Expérimentation. So it's another organ, but of course the foundation also plays an important role. But I think maybe we have the best people to describe what it is about and what they do, because I think it's a crucial part of the experiments.
Yes, thank you. And I invite our guests also to prepare questions or drop them in the chat box if you prefer, or raise your hand as well. So yeah, Timothée and Antonin, would you like to address this point?
Go ahead, Timothée, if you want.
Shortly, because I have to go, as you know. The fond expérimentation, the fund of this experiment, have to has the role to finance, to control, to evaluate this experiment. It is a normalization, small, a little one, but it's a normalization of the experiment, because all the experiments or the territories can't do what they want. There is a frame. And I see this fund of experimentation as the guardian of this frame. You understand? Maybe.
Well, if you might, just kind of complete. Actually, as Ariane said, it was a civil initiative from association, big association in France, and as she said, the parliament decided to make a law, but to pilot and to make sure that all this public money goes to the CEP and to control the system, they had to develop another organization, a public organization called Le Fonds d'Expérimentation in French. It's an experimental fund in which you find 30 people working to pilot all this public money that goes to this CEP. But when the experimental state started, we decided that all those associative civil society construction had to continue to work because we had like more than 200 territories we wanted to experiment. So we had to prepare them, and of course by trainings, and also we had to, I don't know how to say it, but maybe keep an eye on what the state will do to make sure that all the fundamentals of the experiments will stay in a second step. And that's what we did. And that's why, for example, we asked for many things in the second step. For example, I could say that we didn't want the public officers to have all the power in territories to decide who is deprived of employment or who is not, to decide which activities we had to develop because of, I don't know, few public officers. I decided that we had to develop this kind of activity, but that the territory had the lead to decide. And as Ariane said, if I remember well, that's true that in France we have this authorization to experiment, and it's written in our constitution since 2008. And that's how we were able to break a bit the law, the normal law we have to have this experiment. So in a way, we have two legs to walk, one public leg from the experiment and another societal leg that we represent to make sure that the experiment respect all those fundamentals and to prepare all those territories who wants to get in.
Thank you, Antonin. We have a question from Jean in the chat. As I understand it, job guarantee would mean that people have a right to work on demand. Is it possible in this framework? And if not, why not? I interpret this to mean as a matter of implementation. If somebody in the territory, and Jean, you can correct me, if somebody in the territory can come and apply, are they guaranteed that they can walk out with an opportunity?
Yeah. That's all the specificity of this experimentation, that every volunteered people will have a solution. First, we thought that it would be only in our company for employment purposes. But after a few years, we thought that, as I said in the introduction, that there were some solutions around. What the local committee for employment show is that all those actors, public, businesses, don't talk together on those territories. So first, you can find some solution to these people, to existing solution on the field, on the territory. Then, if those people don't find such a solution, they will be hired in those companies for employment purposes. And in a way, that's a problem for us, because sometimes it creates some tension between actors. Some people prefer to go to CEP because they've got permanent contracts in those structures, whereas they won't have such things in other structures on the territory. So the notion we try to evolve is that we have to find like a security net to all those people. Say to those people that in any way, any kind, you won't be deprived of employment at all. But we won't be able to say where. But this local committee for employment will have the responsibility to find you a solution. And because it's a right written in the Constitution, you may be even allowed to go to the court to say, my right is not respected. The state has to do something. Today, courts say that the state just have to engage all what they can do to provide jobs, but there are no results obligation. Whereas you could change this approach from courts. Maybe what we do will help us to go to this results obligation.
Thank you. We have another question, Isabelle. Is that a question or comment? It's interesting to know that many stakeholders are represented in the board of the Experimentation Fund. Okay, such as trade union representatives, employees association. Maybe you can elaborate a bit on this. Is this, was there kind of a very deliberate strategy to bring them to the table? Was this a process that was quite organic? And then maybe if you can tell us a little bit more about legislative efforts at the national level. If I recall, maybe 2 years ago, there was even an introduction of a job guarantee law that was struck down in Parliament. But how does that intersect with your work? Is the strategy to expand and elaborate on these programs, or is it a multi-pronged strategy where we can have kind of a national, also legal framework for guaranteeing this right?
Despite of our results, all what we built is really fragile. I mean, no, we have to say so. We have to fight every day, maybe against capitalism, but whatever. What I say, no, it's a bit paradoxical. We have a president, Emmanuel Macron, who defended a lot the experimentation, whereas all this cabinet and Ministry of Labor were not so convinced about what we were doing. So it was really, really hard. It was a parliament initiative, then defended by the French president of the Republic, and then the parliament had to do something at the end of the first experiment. What I could say is that whatever, the state is controlling the system, because in this public fund you've got a public officer, government, I don't know how to say in English, government commissar, who can say yes, no, whatever. But what we have to say that the Minister of Labor can control the system, but it's just on the paper, because from the experience we see that it's really a collective approach we have, with more than 50% which are in this association, and they work all together every year, all the time. That's really important to say so, because in a way I think that the state doesn't control so much the system he just created right now. And he's got another problem, is that now we have more than 2,500 employees, and if tomorrow they have to stop the system, what do they do from these people? 1 year from the French election, that's another political issue problem maybe they have. So it always has been fragile, but it had been accepted by all the governments because it was an experimentation. To say we have three steps. First step for 5 years, second step 5 years, and we will see after what we do, generalization, as Timothy said, or whatever we do. So what we have to work on right now is that experimentation will end in 3 years. So in 3 years, we have to be able to propose a new scheme of what could be a job guarantee. And that's why recently we decided to show them that we are committed to 3 fundamentals for the future. First, that will do permanent contract. I think it's really important because this permanent contract in France allows to all other rights to go to the bank, rights to buy a car, to ask for to have a loan, and all the stuff. Second, it was the territorialized governance. It's really important that the territory can have a power to act, not just a power to discuss, but also a power to act. That's really new for us, especially in France. And finally, financing up to the level of need. Every job at home. Every job we need to be. Sorry, I have sick kid at home, and we have to finance up to the level of need of jobs we have to create. And that's another problem we have with the scaling up. Is that now we have the Ministry of Finance that starts saying, "Oh, it can cost a lot, this little thing," and we start having some tension about this. So the big work we have to do, and maybe in Belgium you've been quicker than us in France, is to show that it doesn't cost much, and maybe it doesn't cost. From the pig I showed you before in my presentation, that's what we have to say. Even if it costs 7,000 a year per person, the state has to think: is it so expensive? We don't think so, and I think even that with this system of activation of passive expenses, we can even show that it costs almost nothing. But we have a big work to do on this, and I have to say that the state doesn't really help us in the evaluation to do this study. So I think we will have to do it by our own.
Thank you. This is a real challenge because the criteria for evaluation remain still these criteria of cost effectiveness, unfortunately. And, you know, even the research is a bit difficult to access because there are so many non-monetary. I mean, we do know that so many of the costs of unemployment are non-monetary and not easily quantifiable. And so I can appreciate how challenging the evaluation will be because the consensus or the kind of research that's out there has these very narrow metrics of success. But I want to ask maybe Oriane to talk a little bit more about, you know, what's next for the program and, you know, how are these different constituents thinking about, you know, implementation, development, despite all the challenges that you outlined, and are there civil society groups that might be willing to step in and fill the void, or is there some kind of social dialogue that might lead to that?
So on this particular question, I will ask some help from my colleague and friend Julien, who's around, and he's really like up to date on everything. I'm sure we'll have a better answer.
Thank you. Hi, Julien.
Hi. It's kind of difficult to answer this question because just as Oriane said, part of the dialogue is now being held behind the doors of cabinets, so we don't know much for now about the forthcoming laws. And regarding the association that are interested in this project, actually in some cities, local workers' union are involved in the project, but the head of the unions, at the federal level, they are not so much interested in it. So we don't really know how they will deal with that. And we have election in Belgium in 2 years, and we know that some of the left parties and the green parties are going to push this proposal for a job guarantee and a territoire zéro chômeur again in the forthcoming election process. So some people are interested in it, some are not, and it's kind of it's not really clear for now who is really interested in it, and there are discussion inside those organizations. So it's not a monolithic situation. That's all I could say for now. Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you. Are there other questions from our guests for our speakers? I can maybe perhaps ask one more, and whoever would like to take it, and all of our guests who are here. There are multiple initiatives and programs. At the European level, there has been a program for quite some time on the books called the Youth Guarantee that is dealt with the youth unemployment, but again, not exactly in this direct employment approach, and it's left up to the individual countries to implement, and some have taken the traditional route of just training. Others have attempted to kind of experiment a little bit with youth direct employment. My understanding is that it was strengthened or reformed a little bit. So there's that one program, there are public employment programs that, there's a different track of creating. The zero long-term unemployment areas is original because it centers the unemployed and the right to employment in its kind of mission and vision about guaranteeing employment and on these democratizing principles. Are there ways in which these multiple frameworks can potentially work together, whether it is as a practical matter at a legislative level, or even as a strategy level of how to expand these types of programs, given the many frameworks for creating jobs directly? How are people thinking about this question? Yeah, Oriane.
Yeah, I don't have a very particular answer on the youth guarantee, but I think that indeed creativity requires us to try to make different initiatives work together. So I think this is very important to have this transversal understanding of what happens, but at the same time to keep an eye on the different levels, because indeed I think what makes Territoire such a strong project is this connection to the needs of the territory and to the ground and to this democracy ideal. So I think that indeed this big frame always carry the risk of losing track of these other parts of the project. So I would be in favor. I think there were some proposals at the end of Timothee's presentation that I found interesting, because they were going into that direction of articulating things that were more like not global, of course, but like national, but to territorialize forms of deliberation to implement them. So I think this is actually a crucial dimension.
Yeah, Isabel, please.
Thank you. Thank you all for such an interesting workshop. I wanted to ask you, probably at this stage it's only Antonin, and then we leave you to take care of your kids. We know that in France there is a big reform coming, which I think is called the France Travail law, which the government has in the making, with a revision of the rights attached to the RSA, basically it's the minimum revenue guarantee to all, that is now being in the process of being conditioned to a few hours of working. So how do you see this how do you see these developments interrogating the fundamentals of territoire, or how do you see this as maybe an opportunity to highlight the very specificities of the emancipatory dimension that is behind the Territoire project, that probably then it's the time to really make even clearer because of these developments happening?
Well, you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
France Travail, as you call it, yeah, it's a global change of institutional landscape, and actually we don't really see where we go, because maybe we can share some of intuition they have, saying that we have to go to the people, make with the people, but actually the person we just imagine it, all the system says two things. First, we have to make with the territories, but, well, slow down, the state has to decide. Second, they say it will need around 5 billion euros per year. And in the same time, they've been searching for like 18 billion euros for all the recent reforms they've made. And they also say that all the ministry have to make some economy. So 5% on every minister. So I don't really see how they will be able to deal with these two items. But we, it's funny you talk about this, because on Monday, we'll see the French labor minister and also all his cabinet to see how we can work into this new institutional landscape. And we want to just to tell them that they don't look at what they have done themselves. Like, we are experimenting for more than 8 years, and I think there are many things they could learn from us, but actually it's not the mindset they are in. So I couldn't answer right now. What is sure is that we'll have to deal with it. I mean, it will be the new institutional landscape. So we have to see where will be the connection and how to conjugate our working organization with the new organization. But as I said, it will be developed on 3 years. So we have time to see how it will be working, and they will go through experimentation in few regions first. So I think we have a little time to think. But I think we can't be just passive about this in France. Now I think it's time for us to be offensive, and we want to, with all the network for we have around us, all partners, to make a proposal. And that's why we start, I think Timothée we talked about it, a big consultation of all those networks to be able in May 2024 make a proposal to the state to say, okay, if you want to have a solution to long-term unemployment, you can't just have France Travail or a reform of all this institutional landscape. You will have to accept that the market, the capitalist market, just don't want of those 2 million people, and we have to find a solution somewhere else in some new structures we create. But when you see how Macron is thinking, I think we can far of this. So we have to unite to make a proposal and stop being passive and just wait for problems, money problems, and all what they try to do with us. So maybe it's a bit I don't know, in Belgium a bit opaque, and there are some people talking in cabinets behind doors. In France, not behind doors, but we can see that we are not in the system, in the way of the think, and we have to. We have always pushed doors, so we will continue to push doors. And I think also that we will find a solution if the European Union do something. And that's why it's really, really important with the perspective of European election to continue this work. And that's why, for example, Laurent Grosguillaume will be in Porto this weekend. We will see with all those people how push, and thinking about Orlaluc, all those old people in the European Parliament, what we could push at the European level, because if the European Union moves, I think we could have the same thing then in France as it has been done with the youth program. I think Pavlina talked about a few years ago, with many billions that have been put it on this direction. So we have to, I think this is our perspective. Sorry, it's a bit hard to talk with the child next to me.
No, not a problem at all. We hope for the best for the child. And any other concluding thoughts, any comments? This was really a wonderful discussion. I just heartfelt thanks to our guests, Oriane, Antonin, and Timothée. So much to learn from these experiments, and we will be staying tuned for other developments. Please do keep an eye out for our next seminar, because we will continue this discussion. And we will look at the UN report on the job guarantee that is coming, on June 21st. Thank you, Isabel. And so we hope to see you there. And thank you once again to everyone.